So in the next, let's say 40 to 45 minutes, I'm going to take you through an end-to-end analytics journey, some of the components of which you would have already gone through, but it would be worthwhile visiting all of these components right from the pre-engagement phase through the engagement phase, and then following it up with the post-engagement phase, right? And I believe a lot of you wouldn't be exposed to the pre and the post-engagement phase where a lot of critical decisions on the project is taken. While we go through that journey, I will also cover, what are the skill sets required for you to be a great data science consultant, right? And then how does a typical day life, look for a data science consultant, right? Just to give you a sneak peek into, what a person goes through on a day-to-day basis. Then we will cover a case study on Amazon, user reviews analysis, and then we'll open it up for questions. Okay, let's start off with the phases. So every analytics engagement would have three phases, which I talked about, right? The pre-engagement, then you have the engagement phase and the post-engagement phase. So we'll detail out each of these in the subsequent slides. So just to give you a brief, you have a pre-engagement phase, which is essentially your kickoff and readiness. And then the engagement phase, which is actually the solution build happens here. Right, where you set up the team, you break down your MVP, which is the minimum viable product that you've agreed to, into smaller chunks of, let's say, defined work. And then how do you really communicate those insights effectively to your clients? And then the post-engagement phase, right, where you go live. There is a prep phase for going live. Then comes the measurement and the success tracking phase of the project, and then there's a feedback loop coming in from the ground once you deploy your solution. And then how do you really scale your solution to different markets, geographies, categories, so on and so forth. So typically, this end-to-end, by my experience of about 8 to 9 years, this whole continuum that you see over here takes about 3 to 6 months. It depends upon the nature of work, the analytics work that you are executing for your client. Okay, let's look at, on the first component, which is mapping the journey of a client, right? And understanding pressing needs of where analytics can play a pivotal role. So if you look at the leftmost side of the slide, right, you have, on one hand, you have sophistication, right, playing a role of the analytics solution. Then you have priority areas. Then you have markets, and then you can even add a layer of category. And within every, let's say, developing, emerging, or whatever markets that you have, you also have the solutions coming into play or the priorities. For example, it could be, you want to optimize your RTM, which is route to market models, or it could be you want to develop an insights factory, or you want to invest in, let's say, omni-channel. So once you have sit down with your client, you have a workshop, with all the stakeholders in a particular, in that workshop, what you would do essentially is try and understand with interviews with each of these stakeholders. You would try and map on a similar fashion, what is the priority for each of the stakeholders. So you'll have people from supply chain, you'll have people from marketing, from finance, so on and so forth, right? Across geographies, for example. And really put it down and say, okay, these are my focus areas. So let's go finally to the second aspect, which is to scope out the immediate needs and the future client needs, right? So let's say you have had that workshop and now you are in a position to identify what is key for the client, right? You zero down basis your discussion with your sales leader, with the business stakeholders, and then finally you say, okay, and for example, I want to identify the right POS universe. What I mean by that is I want to identify, let's say I have stores, and across my stores, I want to gather all the intelligence around those stores, right? Using that intelligence, I want to segment my store. So that is the first thing, let's say I want to do, okay, to create a segment of my stores. Then once I have kind of segmented my stores, the next thing that I want to tackle is the CRM aspect of the solution, right? So which is having right contracts, right store engagement, so on and so forth. Then let's say after I've executed these, then I want to move to, something which is next best action. For example, the best execution strategy that needs to be in place. Right? So these are sample priorities that I've, showcased over here. But when you engage with your clients in a workshop, you would need to really sit down with them and come up with this kind of a framework, right? That in the first 2 months, I'm going to tackle this. In the subsequent 2 months, I'm going to tackle this, so on and so forth, right? So just one point over here is when we finally zero down on what you really want to solve for, the priority would be to achieve the impact within the shortest possible time, right? That is where you will gain the confidence of the client, right? If you show quick wins to the client, they will have confidence, okay, you are in a position to solve this problem quickly and also get the buck for us, right? And then there is, of course, a monitoring phase where, all of this will go into a support phase, and it gets executed on a month-on-month basis. The next aspect of the pre-engagement phase is a high-level solution approach. So you would need to showcase to your clients the focus problem area and also what your expertise is there in solving that problem area. So let's look as a sample, problem area. For example, this is a production line, and essentially you're trying to identify if there are defects in your bottle, which goes onto your production line. So there is a component where there is a liquid, getting filled in your soap bottles, right? And then there is a labeling which happens, right? And the idea is to see if there are issues or defects with that labeling, right? And so once it moves into the let's say the production line, where there is a place where there is a camera attached, and let's say that camera is able to rightly capture those images, send it back to your ERP systems, and then your AI engine will identify, read and apply those image algorithms to rightly identify if there are defects in your bottles or not, and then send it back to your legacy systems. And then you could think of having let's say a robotic arm or so to remove those defect bottles, and then finally it gets shipped out to a retailer. So at this particular stage, you would do two things. One is to identify the as a state of the client, which is as of today, what is happening. And that is very important when you actually track, or measure success for the client, or the before and after of every project, right? To show gains that you've tremendously improved your processes, and also you've brought in certain significant cost savings or revenue incremental, which you've brought through the project. Right. So this is a dummy example for you to understand what is going to be a future state of the process. And then you will follow it up also with the solution architecture, because it's important for them to understand what components you will be internally working out, and what components, let's say if it's going to be on prod, right? What is going to be on the cloud, for example. So the same example, let's say you have images coming in on the production line, then you have storage happening, and then there will be someone to annotate all the images, right? So once you've at the build phase, right, at the training phase. And so that annotation happens, and then there is a performance of your models, and the feedback of the models are passed on to, let's say, a big data SME or a computer vision team, who in turn will, deploy these models on the cloud, and using, your native, let's say, an image API that you've built. And finally, what happens is there are new set of data coming in, which is new images of bottles. And then you want to send those images back to your storage after, doing the prediction, right? And once it goes back after predictions back to the cloud, then there is an element of human verification happening. And then finally, it gets sent back to your systems onto the production line, where you're able to gauge whether this is a defect or not defect, right? So an architecture like this will help the client understand, okay, you understand the business, you understand the systems, you understand, let's say, how the analytics framework will be applied to our business problem, and that you're in a position to solve that. And then comes the toughest part, where you need to chalk out the project plan, right? You have a like I said, you have a pre-project phase where, there is an alignment of scope, data, and we'll talk about that in a bit, but then you have acquisition of data and all that getting signed. Two critical points that I wanted to talk about here is one is checkpoints with business review, right? The client is not going to really wait for you, for let's say 6 weeks or 8 weeks to come up with a solution and then show, okay, this is working out well, this is not, right? So you'll have to have intermediate checkpoints where you showcase your work to the client and say, okay, this is the progress that I've made so far. These are the outcomes of that exercise that I've done over the last 2 weeks, if it is in a sprint mode, right? So that is how you would chalk out a project plan, keeping in mind business reviews in place, and also a go live in mind. And when you essentially put out the go live dates, be very careful on that, because you would need to account for something which is go live prep, right? Where you want to socialize your solutions within the organization well, so that they understand what is the new change that you're trying to bring into the organization, right? So you need to account for those factors as well before you go live. And we'll cover those aspects in the subsequent slides. Then on the engagement model, this is again, different for different organizations. This is just a sample model that I've, brought up over here. So let's say there is a steering committee, and a steering committee will comprise of leaders from your, service provider, like the boutique analytics company, and then there will be business people onto the steering committee, stakeholders, senior IT folks as well, who will provide that thought leadership in driving these solutions, right? And a very high level, monitoring of the health of the solutions and the quality and the service deliverables. And so this layer also acts like a final escalation point. Then, under your lead consultant, you would have a project person who would kind of, bring all your data scientists, engineers, and consultants together and lead the project, right? So there will be a spoke, and essentially that person is going to liaison with your project managers. And these project managers at the client side could be IT managers, it could be business heads. So again, it depends, right? And they typically would engage on a bi-weekly basis, right? To keep track of the progress of the work that you're doing. And also, in terms of query resolution, in terms of understanding business needs, you would need to do that back and forth with your project manager. Now, the project manager, suppose, for example, if he or she is from the IT side of the business, right? So obviously, when you're trying to solve a problem, the IT person would not have complete understanding of the business. And hence, the business stakeholders buy-in is also required when you are chalking out this plan. Then let's move on to a very important aspect when you try to lock, let's say, the pre-engagement phase would be to establish the success criteria for the project. So I've stated 2 examples over here. Let's say it's a recommender system that you're trying to build. Once you've built that system, okay, how do you define that the recommender system is really doing well, right? And this comes with experience of, let's say, working or deploying these kind of solutions on the market. Let's say, a typical recommender system, for example, okay, would give gains to about 10 to 12%, for example, right, over your net revenue, or for example, 2% or 3%. It depends on the market, it depends on the category, it depends on many factors, right? And you would need to establish that at the beginning of the project, because that's how you will gauge what is the success of that particular solution deployed on the market. It could also mean not just limiting yourself at net revenue. It could be, let's say I want to scale this to 100K stores and having a coverage of 5 billion revenue by so and so timeline, so on and so forth. And then if need not be on net revenue, if you look at a route optimization solution, it could be about coverage, right? And it could be about, transport cost savings that you want to bring through your solution. Then another important aspect is, while we talked about all of these things like, success criteria, engagement model, the MVP, and also a high-level solution approach, while, all that is great, but doesn't work if you don't have the assets required to churn out the results, right? Which is your data, right? Now, this is an example, again, putting out there when you are striking those conversations with your stakeholders within the company or your clients. You, as an analytics expert, would know that, okay, to solve this problem, there are certain must-have data sets that is required. There are certain good to have, and then there are certain not so necessary, data sets. So you need to bucket it out, saying that to run this program, I definitely need these 4 or 5 things. For example, it could be something like your POS sales, right, which is point of interest sales, or it could be something which is related to the characteristics of the stores around you, right? Or it could be something related to product information. Obviously, you would need, the product hierarchy, right? What category, what brand, variant, so on and so forth. And then you would also need the campaign calendars for example, if you're doing, trade promo analytics, right? So you would need to understand, what has been the past promo calendar, and also possibly the future promo calendar to come up with the right, solution or a recommendation in terms of promotions. What is working well, what is not working well, and what should be the right promo strategy going forward. So some of these things you would need to pick and choose to be categorized into must-have, and then you have certain good-to-haves, and then not so necessary. So this is a template, but you can imagine that this has to be more detailed, where you would have certain KPIs or metrics where you need to understand in terms of availability. Some of this information would not be 100% accurate. Also, what is the completeness of this data? You have an inventory of all of this information, which is then passed on to your clients, and then they will review it and send it back, and then you are kind of, okay, you're now almost good to go. Okay, and then you would need to align on a tech stack, right? Many a times what happens is you have no clue when you start a project on what you're going to work on, right? And this should not be a part of the engagement phase. You need to align well in advance that, okay, I'm going to deploy my solution on cloud. And as a sample tech architecture, let's say the data from, let's say, FTP is going to be dumped onto your blob, for example. Okay, if I'm looking at Azure, and then it moves on to data lake storage through factory. And then let's say I'm going to run all my processing and business logic on your Databricks, and then further, push it to ADLS. And then there is a access layer of DB, and then you finally consume it to Power BI. So this flow needs to be aligned at the beginning of the project. Okay, so we are done with the pre-engagement phase. Now, just one piece which I've not added is there is an SOW which gets signed, and then you are actually good to go, right? So once an SOW is signed, you would have a timeline which will be internally aligned, where you need to set up the team, and this is the toughest part, to set up an A team, right? Where you have a manager who will manage and orchestrate between all your team members from different skill sets. So depending upon the nature of project, you would need to bring in these kind of folks. So you would need to bring in, for example, if you're running a very big program, right, and which involves a lot of let's say algorithms, heavy on algorithms or heavy on design, right? So you would need to bring in design experts as well, and heavy on engineering. So you need to bring in the big data SMEs as well onto your project, right? So this is a very crucial phase where you bring in those your folks onto the table and brief them about the project. So transitioning from setting up the team and to setting up the working cadence, right? So once you've set up the team, you know that this is your team that you're going to go work with. You have to have these daily stand-ups or alternate day stand-ups where you would need to come up with a detailed project plan. Everyone needs to be knowing what they need to do. If you're working in an agile mode, then you would have sprints, right? And initial part would be, let's say there is a data discovery phase where all of them is trying to validate the data, which eventually I will cover in the subsequent slides. But these are the kind of things that you would need to assign to different teams so that they are engaged throughout the program. Then as a consultant, as a manager or as a data science lead consultant, you would need to work closely with your data science teams on algorithms. It's not like typically where, you've handed over the plan to them and they will do their job, or, I don't need to monitor them and I'm sure that, they will execute it. No, because when you work in teams, you generate a lot of ideas, and to solve the same problem, there could be multiple ways and you just need to brainstorm together as a team to get the right set of solutions on your table, right? And then also, which is very important, is to work closely with your engineering team, to set up the right pipelines. Once you have the ingestion coming onto from FTP to Blob, then what is the flow going to look like, right? Another interesting and an important thing is to work with your design experts or your visualization experts in case you're, like, for example, you're trying to set up a web app or you're trying to, the end consumption is going to be through a Power BI application. Right, so need to set up those initial conversations and then work closely with the design experts as well throughout your sprint. For example, if you're working in an agile mode, I briefly talked about breaking down the MVP into phases. So let's say have a phase one where you're talking about data discovery and validation. Okay, I won't go into details of it, and then you have a phase two where you talk about data harmonization and transfer. This is where the solution build happens, where you start the solution build, where you harmonize your data, you do a prep for your model, you do some feature engineering, which is very important for your models, right? And then you come to the fact where you develop these AI models, right? And for example, it's, you're developing an AI engine for a personalized offer. What kind of different algorithms would you use? And once you have those tried and tested those algorithms, are you in a position to understand certain thresholds from the algorithms or certain let's say aspects or insights that you can generate, and then even to the extent of let's say developing a tool where the end consumption is going to be more user friendly for the client, right? Now so everything is great so far. You've built wonderful solution, like a great algorithm behind your solution, which works really well, which has a great accuracy. Also, you have done some great feature engineering, which has also resulted into a very good accuracy of your model. But all that doesn't work well if you have not communicated your insights effectively to your client. So when you do that, there are certain pointers. One is be as visual as possible. Right? Don't be very text heavy. And you need to gauge your audience before you share your insights. Right? If it's going to be a business person, you can't be really very technical about your work, right? And if it's going to be someone from the analytics team itself of the client that you're going to talk to, then you can afford to be. Then how do you really tie up your insights and then come up with those recommendations, right? Just as an example, let's say you want to do some clustering. You've done your clusters, you've got your homogeneous clusters, and then you want to understand what are your levers, which is resulting into identifying those homogeneous clusters. For example, you have then you want to, let's say you want to run a regression model and understand. Sorry, if you want to run a classification model and understand, let's say, what are your drivers to those particular segments. Okay, so imagine Q3 or a quadrant 3 as a segment. Okay, and I'm trying to understand and profile this particular segment. So this segment is, for example, is being driven by high medical and let's say medium light life, and a lot of there are a lot of ATMs around stores which are within, for example, quadrant 3, and typically the stores within this quadrant 3 are having high monthly turnover, so on and so forth, right? So these are my drivers to these to these set of stores within quadrant 3, for example. Okay, and I'm visually representing this chart to the client. Now, how do you now come up with a recommendation? So one sample recommendation would be, since you have, your medical facilities closer to quadrant 3, which is the stores within quadrant 3, essentially a particular category X, right? It is being influenced, for example, through those medical facilities. So essentially, you need to identify the stores which are closer to, those medical facilities, and then ensure that category X items do not go out of stock in those set of stores, which is present in quadrant 3. Right. Now that you have kind of communicated effectively, you have recommendations, and you've now set that up for the client. There is a post-engagement phase. Right? Quickly go through this again. You have a go live prep phase, which I talked about earlier as well. And these, what you see on your screen are big components by itself. You have a workshop where you need to showcase demos of your product or your solution, and essentially trying to socialize your solution within the organization. Follow it up with trainings and collaterals with for example, with the sales rep. You need to send out flyers, videos. And then there is a big component of change management where people, process, systems also come into play. There is a mindset thing involved, and they would need to tune themselves to the new ways of working, right? That is a critical aspect. Then you have tech readiness, right? So finally you have a solution, but then let's say that solution is good to go, but it's not being, there are loose ends in terms of tech where it is not, let's say it's not getting plugged to your legacy systems, right? Then what is the use? If a particular sales rep is not on the ground able to view the recommendations coming from your AI engine, it doesn't really help, right? So all this prep needs to be there before you actually go live. Once you've gone live, you've deployed, after let's say 2 or 3 months of deploying the solution, you will start tracking. And I talked about, incremental cost savings or net revenue growth that you've tracked as a success criteria. Along with that, you will also do some compliance measurement techniques, tracking, right? So for example, if it's a recommender system, you would want to track your SKU compliance. And by that, I mean is your AI engine has recommended SKU 1, SKU 2, and SKU 3 to be sold to a particular store, but you do not, let's say as a sales rep, you do not sell all of them. You sell only 2 of them, right? So you have kind of 66% of compliance in that particular store. So it's a bottom-up approach where you would look at the most granular level, and you're checking if the compliance is being met at a store level, and then you gradually move up, let's say to a territory level or a region level or a category level. What is the compliance that is being maintained through your recommender system? It's a very critical aspect in terms of measurement tracking. And for route, it would be a route compliance, right? If you're suggesting that this should be the right path that a sales rep should do, then are they really following that path? Then typically once you deploy a solution, you would have a lot of hiccups, right? It's a machine trying to recommend a solution, right? Which is not 100% acceptable solution on the ground, because you'll have a lot of ground realities and challenges, right? Which will come into play over here. Okay. So you will keep getting those feedbacks, and you would really need to analyze for yourself. For example, if this feedback is really making sense to be added as part of the solution, that is one. And can it be really implemented, right? So you need to create those backlogs and start working on those improvisations on your solution, which is very important if you're looking to build a scalable solution. Now, finally, I talked about it. So you have all the components in place, but you really want to leverage the true power of the solution, right? Which is not just market, let's say US, but you want to now move to other geographies and other categories and really go full scale, right? So how do you kind of automate and build that solution, which can be leveraged across different markets and categories? So that kind of brings to an end to the post-engagement phase. Now, now that you've seen the journey, an interesting question is, how do I prepare myself to be, a data science consultant? While I, join and do these kind of projects, how can I be really empowered to execute my job? Now, the first thing is, the ability to conceptualize your solutions for real world problems. So, how are the 2 questions that come up is, do you constantly analyze how real world and business problems can be solved through data analytics? Is that a rigor that you have brought into your daily life as well? These kind of questions are something that you need to ask yourself. Then can you really break down a solution? You have a solution, but you struggle in kind of breaking down that solution into smaller components, which can be done through an issue tree, right? I wouldn't go into the technical aspects of how you build an issue tree, but I think it's a very important one when you're trying to do some real problem solving, right? Then you move to let's say the skill set of deep problem solving, right? We know that AI can't really solve all the problems in the world, right? AI alone can't do it. There has to be very great engineering behind it and also design behind it, right? And I can think of an example. Let's say, for example, Cult, right? a lot of you would be knowing about Cult. So during this pandemic, they had to pivot. A lot of their stores got affected because people were not in a position to go. So they had to pivot. And when they did pivot, they came up with Cult Live, right? And you would, once you have, your fitness enthusiasts, when they sign up for Cult Live, when they do their exercises, they would see an energy, meter reading, right? And how is that meter reading working? I think it has come up in the articles as well. But how is that meter reading coming up, right? And truly, they have solved, to keep people engaged while at home with your fitness exercise as well, right? It is a real-time energy meeting, trying to read out what is your exactness in terms of performing that exercise and what the positions and the energy that you bring in to do those exercises is what is really gauged, and they come up with a composite score. And that is a near real-time score that is being fed as a feedback to your user. Now the user gets motivated to do more, and those composite scores are compared, and then people are really thrilled to do those exercises, right? So this is what I call as deep problem solving. Then the third aspect is expertise in technical know-how. Now, many folks as a data science consultant would want to keep away from, let's say, engineering teams or, the AI/ML teams, while they think that, okay, my job is to understand requirements and pass it on to, let's say, the team who's working on it, and I'm done. No, it really doesn't work like that. So first is, if you pick up a particular function, right, let's say marketing or a supply chain function, you would need to, as a data science consultant, you would need to really understand the breadth of solutions within a particular function. So you would have kind of solved almost a lot of problems in that area to know how it really works, because there are a lot of ground realities across clients, markets, formats, right, which will come into play, and that experience will be tremendous and very handy when you're moving on to another project, right? So that breadth of solutions, if you've handled, it is fantastic. Then again, your expertise in your cloud concepts in data engineering. I've talked about it before, but it's very critical when it comes to being successful at your job, right? You have to, day in and day out, you have to talk to your internal stakeholders, your tech team, as well as your clients on proposing what should be the right tech stack, while you have those data engineers already on board onto your project. Then also brainstorm on your AI/ML techniques with your data science team. So there are a bunch of algorithms that you can implement for a solution. How do you pick up the right algorithm and then test it out? I'm sure you will not strike gold on the first instance, but you would need to try and test it out and see what really works, and then move ahead. Right? And then last would come the program management. These are more around the life skills of a particular, when executing a project, right? It could be conflict resolution skills. And this is not specifically only to executing data science problems. It is in general, whenever you're executing large scale problems, you have a lot of conflict coming in between teams, your internal teams itself, right? How do you bring them all onto a common ground? That's very important. Second, you have different teams working. Now, how do you create a constant work pipeline for all of these teams, so that they're able to effectively execute their jobs? That's again important. Then the third part, and a very important part, is having a client first principle. So when you're executing a project, quite often it happens that you might go astray. You might agree on an MVP, but what would happen is, okay, in the bargain of, let's say, trying to overemphasize on particular aspects of the solution, the benefit that the client would get out of the entire solution would be lost, right? Many times it could happen. So for example, if let's say I'm looking at a route optimization solution, right, for example, and the idea is the benefit that I want to pass on to the client through the solution is really is incremental coverage. Okay, today I'm covering 60K stores. And tomorrow I want to cover more stores, and also at the same time ensure that there are cost savings. So keeping that as a focus constantly when you're running these programs and also solving for the problem. There are additionally also more life skills, which I'm not going to talk about right now. Then how does a typical day pass for a data science consultant, right? It's really, he or she will be fraught with so many things, right? Starting, for example, with designing the solutions with your data science team. It could be debugging issues with them, proposing new ideas. Then you talk with your clients on an everyday basis or a bi-weekly basis, and then on the models that you run, on the analysis results, the insights that I talked about. And then how do you keep your team engaged while you discuss and come up with the next course of action for your team on the solution. And then you will also be pulled into meetings where you will be needing to present your solutions to different clients for future opportunities that come along. Then you would also, as like I mentioned, there will be different point of views, right, coming in when you have your Scrum meetings or when you have your team meetings, right? There will be different, and many a times these meetings will be long and there won't be any conclusion out of it. But as a consultant, you would need to orchestrate and bring everyone on a common ground, which I just talked about. So that is also a very important aspect, which you will be pulled into day in and day out. And then finally, a very important aspect is discussing clients on the readiness part of it. So a lot of your clients will not really come up, or kind of understand the background about the importance of acceptability and readiness, which you would need to educate your client on. Right? So that education aspect is critical as well. Okay. So over the next, let's say, 10 minutes that I have, I'm going to talk through a case study on Amazon reviews analysis. Okay. And essentially the idea of this case study is to run you through, the different components of the engagement or the analytics journey, the rigor that is brought in while you, solve for this problem. And for example, this is for an category which is electric toothbrush, right? And the understanding is that the business objective is that users, we want to understand the perception of users with respect to, let's say, attributes for a particular product that you're analyzing. Here it is, let's say, electric toothbrush. What are the different attributes? It could be product effectiveness, battery, price, design of your product, so on and so forth. So it's very important for an organization to really understand what users think of your product, right? So perception of your product is one of the objectives. Then to understand if there are any emerging topics coming out from the corpus of text that you're analyzing, right? So that being said, then you want to understand user sentiment. Now, once you've defined that, okay, this is my objective, then you move to scope, you lock the scope saying, okay, this is the category, this is the market, the geography, and this is the time period of analysis that I'm looking at. Okay, and then you move to the background. Why do you really need to do? So here is where the as a state of the project comes in, where you will understand what are the current systems in place. Right? For example, if the client already has a tool which does it, but that tool is not a dynamic tool; it's a static tool. It helps us in giving insights, but those insights are not real time. Okay, and there are not many functionalities of that tool. Okay, so you capture all of that information. And then you want to, through your solution, you want to come up with the end state, right? So the as a state is important to capture here, right? This is not a very important aspect, which is the business questions answered, but it is preferred because it kind of brings clarity to your clients as to what kind of questions are answered through your solution, right? For example, in our case, it is, the topics or the attributes that, that is garnering mentions. Okay. What is the trend of those discussions, for example? And then what is the sentiment attached to each of these attributes? And then are users really talking about that? I don't know. Okay. And I want to gauge that from, you can't really, sift through all your corpus of data. You want your solution to tell me, okay, this is an emerging topic. Okay. Probably I need to do something about it. Now, just let me take a step back. Why are we really doing text? I'll be very quick here. First, I've already said perception, sentiment. Then another interesting angle is to track, competitive intelligence. Right? If your competition is doing something which you don't know, right? That's not a good thing. You would need to understand the competitive landscape as well. Then near real-time processing. What is the use of having an insight which is about a month old, right? You would want quick insights so that you can take near real-time decisions, right? Which will essentially bring more context and the recommendation can be more useful or more valid. Now, I also talked about there has to be a feedback mechanism, right? Which is going or plugging into your different teams. And finally, which is, your business impact, right? all of this has to be tied up with business impact. So typical process of a end-to-end text analytics journey would be first you identify the set of reviews that you want to, let's say, scrape, and then you import while you do your web scraping, and then you identify a category and you identify, okay, these are the reviews that I'm interested in, okay, and during this time period, okay, and then you import that data, you do some pre-processing, which we will talk about in the subsequent slides, and then that text has to be converted into a mathematical matrix, which can be consumed into your statistical models, right? And then there has to be a feature engineering layer on top of it, which will come into play and also be fed into topic models if you're interested to understand what are the topic terms that people are talking about as part of your reviews. And then you would also want to understand your sentiment across those attributes, which is done through a sentiment classification. And this acts like an iterative process. So the standard steps, I'm sure a lot of you would be already exposed to the pre-processing steps when you have a text project. So you have reviews. How do you handle those? You scrape those reviews. You treat them by removing special characters, etc. Then there is a tokenization aspect coming into play. Then you would eliminate stop words, and then there is a lemmatization that would happen, right? And then, so once you have your corpus of data that you have treated, then you would want to, for example, this is a bag of words approach, right? Where you would want to come up with the vectors that needs to be fed into your model. So you can think of a count vectorizer or a TF-IDS vectorizer to be fed into your mathematical models. So you can really think of scale over here in terms of the analytics rigor. You can add in more layers, like you can explore n-grams model or advanced techniques as well. But this is just to give you an understanding of when you kind of go through your project, there are multiple ways of solving a problem. Even, for example, feature engineering over here, which will help you come up with the right set of insights which you're interested in, or build a very sophisticated model. And then you will then import that information. Essentially, your document term metrics will then further get split into two lower dimensionals when we're looking at building topic models, right? When I'm talking about those lower dimensions, then you would bring in the topic term matrix as well as a document topics matrix as well. I'm not going to get into the details of how the algorithm works, but essentially it is looking at topic terms, which is through your corpus of data, and then seeing how closely associated those topic terms are to a particular topic across your documents or in the corpus of text that you are analyzing. Right? Just to give you an example, let's say it's an unsupervised machine learning problem. So typically, like in k-means, you would declare the number of clusters in the initial, right? So even here, you would want to declare, let's say, you're looking to have 25 topics, right? And against each of those topics, you have topic terms coming along, right? So let's say you look at topic 2 over here, and you understand, okay, that this topic 2 is talking about charge, okay? And the order of these words are also important, right? So charge, and then essentially then it follows up with certain set of other topic terms. And so I can imagine that the context will be more around, let's say, battery, right? For example. And then let's say I go to topic term, for example, a topic 5, right? And you're talking of buttons, right? So and modes. So it is more around usability and the design aspect of the product, right? So you will get words like this as topic terms. But the thing is that from these terms, you're in a position to understand, what is the set of words that I need to be doing to understand what people have talked about. Let's say I want to define that, very clearly demarcate that people are talking about pricing, people are talking about say usability, people are talking about design, people are talking about user friendliness, for example, right? And across these topics, you want to come up and tag your documents to these topics. Your topic models will not really, it is kind of, giving a vague idea as to where these, what kind of terms are being frequently used, but it doesn't really demarcate every topic to one specific topic, right? So that's when, as a consultant, if the requirement is to clearly demarcate one topic to the other, then you come up with, let's say, okay, topic modeling is great. I will use these inputs to come up with a rule-based topic model, right? And this is very directional topic model. So with this directional input that I get, let me say that, or let me come up with more specific or clear rule-based techniques to define my topics. So you have the first part of your layer that you see, let's say you have these kind of words coming from your topic model. For example, easy to use, comfortable, and then you have, let's say, feels clean or cleanliness. So this is all effectiveness related stuff. So you kind of work backwards. You can identify those keywords and you identify a subtopic, then you define what that subtopic should be. And then you say, okay, what your main topic is, right? And then, for example, your main topic is experience. And then you would bucket all the subtopics to that main topic, right? That's how, you work backwards from topic models to then create rule-based. So when you create a rule-based, you would need to really come up with those rules when you are programming to look at, words which are closer to each other, but doesn't, fall within this limit of words. All of that will come into play when you create a custom algorithm to come up with these rules. Then once you have, and of course, your corpus of text, you won't be able to tag, let's say 100% of the documents that you have, right? You will be in a position to tag about 80, 85% if you're quite exhaustive while tagging. Then then there is a sentiment analysis layer as well. I won't take much time over here. Very familiar. You can think of two approaches. One is a lexicon-based approach where a lot of packages are being used today. Their innate power to come up with sentiment where they attach certain, let's say, value or score to each word, and then comes up with a composite score. Okay, these are just sample examples, packages that I've stated here. And then the second one is to come up with a machine learning model and classify the sentiment. Typical then insights would look like, you have across your different, let's say, your features, you have sentiment attached to each of these features, right? And you're in a position to understand, okay, this is being the most talked about, let's say price, for example, or brush heads. And then you're more interested in, okay, what is the negative mentions about, right? And when people are talking about which attribute amongst these negative mentions. So let's say it is price, okay, or it is accessories, for example. Then within accessories, what are the top three that, that is, brought into light by your users? Then you create a word cloud and try to visually see how that looks like. What are your words which come up from there? Then the thing is, you have a lot of insights coming from this. Okay, that is great, but then you can't really share all the insights. Right? You need to bucket them into categories, and you need to come up with the top ones which you will recommend. Right? Let's say there is a problem with the design, so it has to go back to the design team. Let's say there is a damaged product. A lot of products which is being sent to the consumers are damaged. So it has to be going back to the product research team. Or it has to do with supply chain or service. It has to go to those teams, relevant teams, right? And you need to really state out that, okay, these are the issues that are coming and these are prominent issues and this is the sentiment value attached to it. And this needs to be addressed. Now, quite often what happens is not all of them you are in a position to, let's say, address, right? And so there are certain challenges or priorities that you need to address. Okay, the first two, and I don't have the resources to address the last two or something like that, right? But so the question is, how do you come up with that priority, right? And that's where we kind of plug in. And this is something that you would need to liaise with your client and say that, okay, I can do this also, and which is in line with our thinking of solving the problem of, let's say, incremental sales, because your star rating of a particular product is directly correlated to your sales on Amazon, right? Higher the star rating, higher would be your sales, right? And how do you tie up that one solution to the other solution and really go that next, that extra mile, right? So, like I mentioned, you have those issues you want to prioritize in terms of recommendations, but the idea is to tie up and understand factors which are contributing to negative star rating, right? So what we do as an objective in trying to solve this is, I will be very brief, I think in the interest of time, but essentially to identify factors which are bringing dissatisfaction in Amazon star ratings. Right? You have identified those reviews and you have certain features which you also identified through your topic models and your rule-based models. And then how do you, use that information to come up with the top factors which are bringing dissatisfaction by way of star ratings, and then really understand your direct and indirect impact of these factors on Amazon star rating. Right. So what we did, so for example, you have features, right? You have, let's say 21 features that you're talking about, right? And then you can't really address all of these features. You need to somehow narrow down to the features that are of interest to your client. Then you run a ML model, and then through feature importance, you come up with, let's say, 10 features that you're interested in. And then you can think of applying, let's say, a BPM to come up with a direct and indirect impact. And it'll be more clearer when I go to the subsequent slides. But essentially, what you feed into your BPM network is certain, features coming from your machine learning model from the previous exercise. Let's say something on the top that you see is an output from your Bayesian belief network, where there are direct and indirect impact, right, of negative mentions. So like I mentioned, there is you have user negative reviews, and those negative reviews are in turn bringing down your star rating, and those star ratings are in turn bringing down your sales, right? Now you would want to understand which of those features are having a direct impact. Can you really quantify that direct impact? And also, can you really quantify the the indirect impact coming from? What I mean by that, on the right hand side, you see those you see those remarks, right? Where you have brush heads, and brush heads is then directed towards product faults, and then finally your product faults then goes to negative star rating. Or for example, it is user friendliness, and then it gets directed to accessories, and then from accessories it's kind of contributing to negative star. So this is an indirect impact, right? So on the chart below is what you can visually see, what is the direct impact and what is the indirect impact, and how you're able to contribute that. So through this exercise, what is finally, all this is great, but you don't want to present this in the previous slide, what you saw as an end output to the client, right? You want to really quantify and say that, okay, if I were to improve my product faults, if I were to address that issue, how much of an improvement would that be on your star rating? Right? Let's say I address all the brush heads issues, and all those brush head issues that I have today, it moves from negative sentiment to positive sentiment. If I were to do that, okay, it is going to give me an incremental benefit of 0.2 star rating, for example. And I'd say I addressed accessories issues, right? And I were to convert all those negative to positive, okay, my overall star rating, it is moving from 3.4 to 3.5, right? Which is itself a big jump, right? A lot of organizations have star ratings and reviews as a team within a function which constantly monitors these ratings, because these ratings are very important in terms of driving sales. Right? So this view is kind of giving the business user and the decision makers to really go after what issue I should tackle first, second, and third. Right? As simple as that. Now you could also further explore by tying up all of this insights that come up into trying to understand the levers of sales, which you can think of as a next step over here. I have not brought it out in terms of slides, but let's say you're trying to solve, understand drivers to sales, right? Growth drivers. And then you want to understand what is the impact of media, your promotions, your discounts, deals, along with, let's say, it could be external factors as well as, ratings and reviews, right? And then you will be able to quantify what is the impact of reviews on sales or ratings on sales. And that beta value is going to help you to set up the right framework and also come up with the right set of recommendations. I hope I've taken you through that continuum. So the idea is to take you through that journey, while a lot of you folks would be involved in the engagement phase, where you really solve the problem deeply and explore multiple algorithms. But for the success of the project, it's much bigger, right? You need to rightly set the right, come up with the right expectations at the start of the project. We talked about scoping. We talked about defining that MVP. We talked about setting up the success metrics, and then kind of tracking that in the post engagement phase, looping in the feedback, and also coming up and designing a truly scalable product or a solution. While in large scale programs, right, typically you will have data engineers as well in your project. But the challenge comes in where the data science team says, okay, this is my role, and beyond that I would not go. I limit myself into just algorithms and not really focus on deployment, or let's say DevOps, or trying to create an end-to-end scalable product, right? So that handshake between data science teams and your engineering teams is very important. And I've seen that across projects that I've delivered. So where there is a very good handshake between your engineering teams, let's say you have experts from Azure or AWS, they would not be experts in data science. So they would need to very closely communicate with your data science teams, and your data science teams also would need to work hand in hand with your engineering teams and deploy a solution. So the bottom line is your data scientists need not be an expert in engineering side, but need to know good enough for them to have a good handshake. So I'm assuming that, for example, it's like you want to be a product manager, okay? And as a product manager, you wouldn't want to, go into data science. I think that cannot happen unless you know that techniques. You might not be the hands-on person as a product manager, definitely not, right? But when you are actually, as a product manager, you are coming up with your roadmap, you would need to rightly understand and work closely with your data science teams as well, right? Who's actually deploying, working on your algorithms at the backend to come up with the right set of solution, which is, can be easily, for example, addressed, or is the right solution to what the user has in mind, right? So enough knowledge for a product manager to understand data science, but not be an expert, and need not be an expert in the algorithms. Of course, it is possible to switch to a data science role. So there are certain things that you would need to go through before you actually get into data science. Let's say data science itself as a field, right? First is the right set of orientation, right? So you need to sign up for things which are going to keep you well informed about what is happening in the industry. So your reading has to be really strong. Your hands-on has to be really strong. You need to, either pick up a tool and really work hard in solving those problems. It could be Kaggle problems, and it could be, open problems out in the industry, right? And you take up those breadth of solutions. You pick up a particular function. For example, I'm interested in, let's say, marketing function or a supply chain function. So I look at all the problems within supply chain, okay, and then I understand, okay, these are the set of algorithms applied within, supply chain, for example, and I try and execute that. So you essentially build your resume in such a fashion that you have experience in handling these kind of problems, and that is how you, you show your trust to whomsoever your kind of jobs that you're applying to, right? That you have handled and you have experience in dealing with these problems. I'm going to take components of what I already said previously. So if you're starting off, let's say if you're less than 2-3 years of experience, so or even less than 5 years, one thing which is very important as a when you're getting into a data science role is not one, like 3 or 4, but the part that where you're hands-on, right? If you're really not hands-on, then you will not be in a position to let's say execute projects, right? And by hands-on I mean really strong. Second is your conceptual understanding, your statistical concepts, right? So that is something that you will build over the course of time by being exposed to different concepts, all right? And it's an growing field, so you'll be exposed to a lot of things, but there will be some kind of orientation that you would go through and say, okay, these are the first 4 or 5 things that I would want to go through. Okay, you create timelines for yourself. Okay, the next 2 months I'm going to focus on this, and then you move to another aspect of the solution. For example, then I move to, let's say, unsupervised, then so on and so forth, right? So you kind of build that, and then parallelly you will also update your, let's say you have a GitHub account, and you're presenting all your work on GitHub, and then you are also parallelly building your resume, and showcasing your skill sets and the work that you're doing. So if you're a newbie, right, I would suggest don't really apply for jobs immediately, right? What I would suggest is take a month or so, get yourself ready first, right? And have the right set of skill sets and what kind of jobs you want to apply, so that you have clarity in the kind of roles you want to apply. Okay, once you've gone through that process of 1.5 months, and then you kind of apply for those roles. So that's it, viewers. That's what I have for today.